Hi guys and gals, welcome back to MAT095. So we're in section 1.4 now, which gets into subtracting integers. So now, similar to addition, we can use a specific word to describe subtraction results. So definition, the result from a subtraction problem is called the difference. So now we have two terms that we can use when we're talking math. So sum, remember, deals with addition, and now difference deals with subtraction. So now, as far as doing the process for subtracting, it is sometimes referred to as adding the opposite. Now, why is that? We're going to actually see it. So if we actually use a number line, we can kind of see that the pathway is actually going to be the same when you add the opposite. So let's see what 7 minus 3 looks like. We know it's equal to 4. But if we wanted to draw it, helps if I can count. Okay, so we got our number lined up to 7. And so now, remember, we're always starting at 0. So if we draw our vertical line there, so now let's go all the way over to 7 to start, which gets us to there. And now it also wants us to go back 3. So we got to go back 3. So again, this was 7 this way, but now we want to go back 3. So that puts us at the 4. Now it turns out the pathway for 7 plus a negative 3 is going to be the same exact pathway. So we're going to be going to the right 7, and then we're going to be going back to the left because it's a negative 3. It's going to be going back to the left 3 units. So we're really doing the same path, so I'm not going to draw it again. But that's why it's the same. So now the question is how do we actually get from the one version of subtraction into the version of addition? Because once it's addition, we can use those rules that we just developed. So it's actually a quick 2-step process to change it to addition. So the first step is to change the subtraction to addition. All right, that's pretty quick. The second step is the more important one. So we got to change the second integer to its opposite. Do not change the first integer. So let's try it out on a few examples and see what we get. Now keep in mind that if you already are pretty confident with this stuff and you know how to do it and you're pretty certain you're doing it right, obviously you don't need to go through every single little step. But until you build up that confidence and you know what you're doing, then I would write those extra steps in. Okay, so let's change this to addition first. So we got the negative 6 in front. Again, the first integer never changes. The subtraction, which is next, changes to addition. And now the second number in this case is the 4. So we have to change that to its opposite. So now we're going to change that to a minus 4. So this should be our new problem, negative 6 plus negative 4. And so now we can apply our rules for addition. So what do? If the signs are the same, we add them. You got it. So we got to add those together. So we will get a negative 10 for that answer. All right, let's try a couple more. So again, the first number just comes down. So we got a 4, and now the subtraction changes to addition. But now the second number is a negative. So if we change it to its opposite, it's got to be back to a positive. So we have 4 plus 14, which is 18. Now, another way to think of it, and we've kind of seen this before, is this double negative. We could also think of it as, okay, I'm going to just say 4, and I got my 2 minuses. I like to just kind of put a circle around them and then change it to a plus. So it's almost like a transformer. So you got your 2 minuses and say, I know, kind of silly, but that's a way to think of it. All right, so let's do a couple more. So we have 5, and again, now we got a subtraction, which changes to a plus. Now the 19 is going to have to change to its opposite, which is negative. And so now, what do we do with these ones? The rules for addition when we're adding two numbers with different signs, says we got to subtract. So here we had to add. So now if we subtract those two, 19 minus 5 is 14. And is it positive or negative? You better be screaming negative. So negative 14. Okay. Now remember, we could do this using the two-step process, or we could use the double negative process. Like I said, sometimes the double negative is just a little bit faster. So I got my two negatives, so this should be negative 7 plus 2. And now we can do some subtraction because the signs are different. So we're going to get 5. You got it. We should be negative 5. All right. So that's kind of the idea with subtraction. Not too terrible, just got to be careful. Those signs can really flub you up if you're not careful. So I think there's some more on the next page. So now the problems are going to get a little bit more interesting. There's more layers to it. So let's start with the first one. So now we got a lot of minuses in here, but remember the first one never changes. So let's make that a negative 2. And so now we got this minus sign, changes to a plus. The 2 that follows it has to change to its opposite, so that's a negative 2. This negative changes to a positive, and then the 2 changes to its negative. So again, it takes a while to get the hang of this, so don't get frustrated if you're not getting it. Another way to think of it too is that you're almost like you're squeezing a plus sign right between the 2 and the minus in here. That's another way to think of it. We're going to squeeze a plus sign right in between the 2 and the minus, and that gets it and puts it right there. So whichever way works and it's right, then go with it. That's the big thing. All right, so now we're got a bunch of negative numbers that we're all adding together. So remember, we can flat out add. So we should get a negative 6 if we add all of those 2's together. All right, let's do a couple more. So the 7 stays. And what do you think that's going to look like? Let's give it a shot. So remember, if there's no double negatives, you don't have to worry about circling anything. But if it's just a single negative, you can kind of squeeze that plus sign in there. So we'll squeeze a plus sign between the 7 and the minus. We'll squeeze a plus sign between the 9 and the negative there. And one more plus sign we got to squeeze in. Now remember, once it's all addition, you can kind of mix and match any way you want. But when you got different operations going on, then you got to be more careful. So in this case, we can just kind of pair them off and add those up. So in the first case, are we adding or subtracting though? You got it. We got to subtract. So this should be a minus 2. Second group though, we got to add. So that's going to be a negative 11. And then the last step should be one more addition, which gets you to negative 13. All right. Starting to get it, I think, right? Let's see if I can flub you up a little bit. Be careful. All right, so in this next one, we got a double negative. So remember, double negatives, we can just kind of circle and change it to a plus. So we had a minus 6 plus 3. And now what are we going to do with that? This is a trick because it's already addition. Since it's already addition, we don't even have to change it. We can just copy it down. So that makes it nice. My screen just went off, but we'll bring it back. Anyways, so now we got everything as a plus sign, so that's good. So now we can just start batching stuff together. So if we want to group the first two, we're going to have to subtract, which gets you a negative 3. And the plus minus 7 just comes down. And in this case, we're going to have to add. So that gives you a negative 10. All right. We got just a few left, and that'll wrap up this section. So let's see if we can squeeze it in. We're at 10 minutes, but we'll be okay. So double negative, got it. Double negative, got it. No double negative, so we got to do the squeeze. Squeeze in that plus sign. So -3 plus 8 plus 6 plus a -4. All right, now this one, again, it's all addition, so you can group it any way you want. If you want to group the positives together and group the negatives, go for it. So if we group the negatives, because we can add them, that should give you a -7. The 2 in the middle are both positive, which gives you 14. So now the last step would going to be to subtract. So that should give us, whoops, not a negative, but a positive 7. All right. Now this next one is just trying to give you a little bit of a heads up about how it works when you're writing it in words. Because sometimes in words, it'll, again, it's backwards because, well, it's just the way it is with subtraction. And I'll show you what I mean. So for this one here, it says subtract -3 from 7. So your gut probably is saying, okay, well, that's just going to be -3 minus 7. Well, that's not right. What the problem is the way it's worded, it says subtract -3 from 7. So whatever you're subtracting from has to go first. So in this case, we want to write it as 7 minus, because we're subtracting, but what are we subtracting? We're subtracting a negative number. So it's 7 minus a -3. And so now we do have a double negative. So this is really 7 plus 3, which is 10. All right. Okay, one more problem, and then we'll call it good. All right, so we have -2 plus -11 minus absolute value of -3. All right, we got to be careful of those absolute values. Those ones are weird, remember. But the nice thing is that this first part is already addition, so we don't even have to change anything. So if you wanted to, you could actually group those together right now. So we have -13. Now, for the second part of it, let's really kind of be careful. Now, it's not a double negative situation because it's not parentheses. Absolute values we have to treat differently. So if we cover up the negative, what's the absolute value of -3? Remember, that's just going to be the distance between 0 and -3 on the number line, so that's 3 units. Now, this subtraction in front, we haven't done anything with yet, so we got to just bring that down. So we should get -13 minus 3. Now, if we want to use our rule to change it from subtraction to addition, we could. So that's going to look like -13. We're going to have to squeeze that plus sign in, and that gives us this. And so now they're both negative, so we can add, and we should get a -16. So a little bit interesting because, like I said, you're trying to apply those rules for addition, but obviously it has little twists in it because it's subtraction. So you really got to be careful with that. All right, so we're going to stop there. We're going to jump to 1.6. So we're going to come back to 1.5 later. So if it seems weird that we're going to 1.6, it's not. You'll see why we're doing that in a minute. So we'll see you in a minute. Stay tuned.